Welcome to another quiet journey into the forgotten corners of the past. Tonight, we drift back slowly, gently, to a place you may have heard of in school books or seen carved in marble. A place praised for its brilliance, its philosophy, ancient Athens, into the mud-caked streets, covered in blankets that only hide the rough corners, through the crowded alleys thick with heat and human odor. Here, in the quiet space between wakefulness and dreams, we begin not with battles or philosophers, but with something simpler. Let us unravel the stories behind the marble facades and heroic tales. We will listen not just to the orators and poets, but to the murmurs of everyday life. The arguments at the baths, the scratch of a stylus on wax, the weary sighs of a city, both grand and grim. But we will not be walking beneath the shining columns of the Parthenon with admiration in our eyes. Instead, we'll wander deeper. You may know Athens as the cradle of Western civilization, but cradles, while comforting, are often messy things, wooden, splintered. So allow yourself to settle in. Perhaps you're already tucked beneath warm covers. The hum of the world outside slowly fading. Over the next 2 hours, we will walk the stone paths of ancient Greece, not with urgency, but with soft, deliberate steps. The daily life of an Athenian citizen, and why, despite the poets and playwrights, it may not have been as golden as you were once told. Imagine yourself waking up in Athens, somewhere around the 5th century BCE. The sky is pale and dusted with morning haze. Your home is made of sun-baked mud brick, not marble, contributing to a smell that hangs faintly in the morning air. The alleys between homes are not just for walking. They're a patchwork of activity, people pouring out waste, chickens pecking through scraps, and children darting between pots and baskets. The walls are rough, thin, and do little to block the noise of neighbors stirring just beyond them. You can hear the soft clatter of wooden sandals, the sharp bark of a stray dog in the alley, and the echo of someone coughing in the room next door. You rise. There is no soap. Today, for instance, your name has been drawn for jury service. Yes, drawn by lot, like a kind of civic lottery. Sometimes thoughtless, mob rule with a sense of ceremony. Thousands of men, every day, are randomly chosen to serve on juries. It's a peculiar system, one that reflects the Athenians' deep distrust of concentrated power. In the theater, even in line at the bakery. But there is little space for dissent. Ostracism is a regular event. Every year, the citizens vote to exile one of their own. 10 years, no trial. There, men sit shoulder to shoulder, chatting while relieving themselves. The latrine is cleaned, yes, but not frequently enough. A thin stream of water might flow beneath, but it carries more than it cleans. No hearing. A visit to the baths where the chatter never stops. Someone recites a few lines from a poem. Another argues about grain prices. There are no pillows as we know them, just rolled up cloaks or straw-filled sacks. The bed, if there is one, is wooden, creaking, covered in wool blankets, worn soft with time. Someone sings. Children play with clay figurines in the dust. Dogs sleep in the sun, twitching occasionally in their dreams. Just a name scratched onto a potsherd, tossed into a clay jar with thousands of others. Better, they thought, to let the crowd decide than a single judge. No running water. It's not the white-columned agora you imagine from textbooks gleaming in the sun, filled with reasoned debate. It's more a maze of voices and smells. Olives, figs, fish, some fresh, some not. Then scraped off with a stridula curved metal blade. It leaves the skin feeling smooth, but it doesn't kill germs. Illnesses spread. Colds, fevers, infections. They come and go, sometimes passing unnoticed, sometimes lingering for weeks. Flies gather on uncovered meat. Vendors shout, haggling and boasting. Beneath your feet, dust swirls with every step, mixing with the grime left behind by countless sandaled feet. Instead, a basin filled the night before with cold well water waits for you. Bread, onions, maybe a bit of fish or cheese if you've done well that day. You splash your face, though the water has gone slightly stale. There is no towel. You dry your hands on a corner of your cloak. There are no private bathrooms, of course. Chamber pots are emptied into the narrow streets. The marketplace is already buzzing, though it's still early. And you're not just a bystander in this city. You're a citizen, which means you have duties. And in Athens, civic duty is not a romantic ideal, it's a daily grind. The court is large and loud. Cases are argued quickly. Sometimes just minutes per speaker. There are no lawyers. Citizens argue their own cases, often poorly, sometimes with tears or flattery. You listen, not always understanding the full story. Then cast your vote by dropping a small bronze disc into a jar. The crowd decides. Always the crowd. Democracy, yes, but not the democracy you might imagine. It's direct and fast, and it doesn't end in the courts. Politics in Athens is everywhere. Discussions erupt in the bathhouse, and if your name appears too often, you're gone. You might try to console yourself with the idea of leisures. Surely, a citizen has time to rest. Perhaps, but rest comes slowly. The air is hot, dry, and the city smells of smoke from the cook fires. You pass a public latrine, not a private one. Soap, you may wonder, not in Athens. Cleanliness is more ritual than hygienic. Oil is applied, and yet, for all this, there is still a kind of beauty to the rhythm of the day, the rhythm of their lives. Afternoons bring shade, cooler breezes. A walk beneath olive trees. The evenings are quieter. Oil lamps flicker in courtyards. The city finally exhales. Meals are modest. And sleep, it comes without comfort. You lie in the dim glow, listening to Athens settle around you. It is not paradise. It is not glory. But it is real. And it was, for thousands of men and women, home. The sky over Athens is a muted gray, the kind that gently veils the city in a hush of early morning calm. The air is cool but expectant, as if the city knows something unusual is about to unfold. It is in this quiet hour that we find ourselves among the crowd. All citizens is clear that this trial is not simply about law. It is about Athens itself. He speaks calmly, without performance, as if continuing a conversation he began decades ago. He tells the story of the oracle at Delphi, who once declared that no man in Athens was wiser than Socrates. Puzzled by this, he set out to test it. He spoke to politicians, artisans, poets. Each professed knowledge, yet none could explain their beliefs with depth or clarity. What Socrates found was unsettling, that those who claimed wisdom often had little of it. And in recognizing his own ignorance, he had, perhaps, stumbled upon true wisdom. The irony, he notes, is that this search for truth, this questioning, is what has now led him to stand here, accused and condemned. Its values, its fears, and the uneasy question of how much doubt a society can tolerate before it starts to fray. Meletus stands to speak first. He is young, composed, certain. His voice cuts through the morning with clarity. He accuses Socrates of twisting minds, of encouraging arrogance in the young, of sneering at sacred beliefs. He paints a picture of a man who undermines the city by unraveling the very threads of tradition. Socrates does not flinch. He listens with the patience of someone who has heard such things before, perhaps even expected them, moving slowly, steadily, toward the space known as the Dikasterion, the court. Not a grand building, not a marble, nor roofed, but an open expanse where justice is carried out beneath the ever-watchful eyes of the gods and of men. Today, a man is to be judged, not for murder, not for theft, but for speaking, for asking, for stirring minds. His name, already whispered across the city for years, is Socrates. He does not arrive in pomp or ceremony. There are no guards flanking him, no crowd cheering or jeering. He walks simply, almost unnoticed, his sandals worn, his beard long and uneven, and his cloak more suitable for a wanderer than a teacher. His presence does not command, but it invites, invitation not to follow, but to think. Socrates has always been a curious figure in Athens, a citizen who fought in wars, yet refused political power, a teacher who took no fees, a thinker who wrote nothing down, yet whose ideas reached every corner of the city. His crime, as brought forth by a young man named Mellow, is that of corrupting the youth and disrespecting the traditional gods of the city. To some, this seems absurd. To others, dangerous. As the jury settles in 501 men chosen by lot, when it is his turn to respond, Socrates steps forward and begins not with a defense, but with a gentle challenge. He speaks calmly, without performance, as if continuing a conversation he began decades ago. He tells the story of the oracle at Delphi, who once declared that no man in Athens was wiser than Socrates. Some intrigued, others impatient. Barely, a narrow margin, perhaps 30 votes, in his disfavor. Now comes the sentencing. O sword. In the days that follow, as the formalities unfold, his friends come to visit him in prison. The cell is spare. There is no fear in his eyes, only clarity. His death was not a spectacle. It was a continuation of his life's work, carried out calmly, deliberately, with thoughtfulness and grace. The city that once celebrated thought had found it too difficult to bear, and yet Socrates did not resist. He simply accepted. The dust has settled. The man is gone. But the echo of his voice, measured and patient, still floats gently through time. When the jailer brings the cup, Socrates accepts it without ceremony. He drinks it slowly, without hesitation, and climbs toward a place higher, stranger, where gods once whispered through stone and smoke. A temple veiled in mystery, nestled among the peaks. Let us walk the winding path to Delphi. Then, as the poison begins to take effect, he lies down as instructed. His limbs grow cold. He speaks of the soul, of what might come next. And then, with his final words, he tells those around him to offer a rooster to Asclepius, the god of healing. A strange final message, one scholars still debate. Perhaps he meant that death itself is a kind of cure. Perhaps he meant something else entirely. We will never know. Stone walls, a small window, letting in slanted light. They urge him to escape. Bribes could be arranged. A boat could wait at the harbor, but he declines. And somewhere, beneath it all, the questions lingered. The ones Socrates had asked, the ones no verdict could silence. To escape would be to betray his own beliefs. The law, flawed though it may be, must be respected. He explains to Crito, one of his closest companions, that a man cannot preach justice and then undermine it when it becomes inconvenient. Simply a cup of hemlock poison to be drunk in silence. A peculiar tradition. The accuser and the accused each propose a punishment, and the jury must choose between them. Meletus confidently suggests death. He suggests, almost playfully, that he be rewarded with free meals at the Prytaneum, like a victorious Olympian. The room shifts. Some laugh, some scowl. He then offers a modest fine, one his friends have pledged to pay. But it is too late. The jurors are unmoved. Socrates refuses to flatter. He refuses to beg. He reminds them that he has served Athens not only in war, but in principle. He once refused an illegal order under a tyrannical regime, risking death to remain just. And now he insists he is not a threat to Athens, but its gadfly, necessary irritant, rousing the city from complacency. Still, the courtroom is filled with unease. Democracy, for all its strengths, is not immune to fear. And in times of fear, even the softest dissent can sound like danger. Puzzled by this, he set out to test it. He spoke to politicians, artisans, poets. Each professed knowledge, yet none could explain their beliefs with depth or clarity. What Socrates found was unsettling that those who claimed wisdom often had little of it, and in recognizing his own ignorance, he had, perhaps, stumbled upon true wisdom. The irony, he notes, is that this search for truth, this questioning, is what has now led him to stand here, accused and condemned. The jury listens. The vote is cast, each juror dropping a token, choosing guilt or innocence. Socrates is found guilty. They choose death, no gallows. Socrates does not protest. And so, in a quiet room in the heart of Athens, without violence or fanfare, the man who questioned everything slipped into silence. The streets of Athens moved on. Vendors shouted in the markets. Children chased one another through dusty courtyards. Now, as you rest here, listening to the soft hum of history, let your mind drift. The trial has ended. The courtroom is empty, and now we journey away from the city. We leave behind the courts and prisons. High above the Aegean coast, far from the clamor of Athens, the land rises softly at first, then steeply, folding into rugged hills and limestone cliffs that seem to lean toward the clouds. The path narrows, winding through cypress groves and rocky outcrops, until it finds itself tracing the southern slope of Mount Parnassus. There, nestled into the curve of the mountain like a secret whispered into stone, rests a place of ancient reverence, Delphi. A woman chosen not for beauty or birth, but for her connection to the divine. When petitioners came, whether they were farmers or kings, they would approach with offerings: olive oil, fine cloth, perhaps a bronze mirror or a small figure carved in ivory. They would kneel, often in silence, and present their question. For centuries, cities across the Greek world consulted the oracle before founding colonies, before going to war, before building temples. Leaders would send envoys with careful questions, carefully phrased, hoping the response would favor their plans. But the answers were rarely so simple. The oracle once told a king that if he invaded Persia, he would destroy a great empire. Encouraged, he marched, only to find that the empire destroyed was his own. The message was true, but not in the way he had hoped. That was the genius of Delphi. Its truth bent with interpretation. Its power lay not in certainty, but in the echo it left behind. And the Pythia, seated in her chamber, would inhale deeply. Her body might tremble slightly, her eyes clouded. Sometimes she spoke clearly, other times in fragments. Her voice might rise, quicken, fall into murmurs. Scribes would listen closely, capturing the phrases as best they could. Priests would shape the utterances into verse. And so, a riddle would be born an answer that was never truly direct, but always enough to shift the path of the questioner. She did not walk through the streets like a priestess wrapped in gold. You do not see the Pythia, few ever do. But you hear the whispers, the murmur of the crowd, the low chant of the priests. The scent of laurel leaves hangs in the air, mingling with something deeper, the faintest trace of sulfur or pitch. You are not certain whether it is sacred or strange, and perhaps it is both. Instead, she waited deep inside the sanctuary, cloaked in linen, her body quieted, her breath controlled. She sat not on a throne, but on a simple tripod, 3 legs, balanced over a narrow chasm in the earth. And from this chasm, it was said, rose vapors, strange, intoxicating, invisible but powerful. The ancients believed these fumes connected her to Apollo, the god of prophecy, who had claimed this sacred site after slaying the great serpent Python. From that moment on, the god's voice spoke through her lips. It is quiet, hear not, silent, but still. The kind of stillness that holds memory, as if the stones themselves are listening. Wind brushes lightly through the olive trees. The sound of unseen birds drifts through the air. Underfoot, the path crunches gently, worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims, kings, and philosophers. You approach slowly, your breath steady in the thinning mountain air. There is no rush. Delphi has waited for millennia. It will wait for you. To the ancient Greeks, this was the navel of the world, the Amphilis, the sacred center where heaven and earth once touched. They believed that Zeus himself had released 2 eagles from opposite ends of the earth, and where they met in flight, Delphi was born. This was not myth for them, but orientation. Delphi was more than geography. It was a place to seek clarity when the world grew clouded, and always, at its heart, was the oracle. She was known as the Pythia, but she did not speak plainly. Imagine standing there, just outside the chamber, the torchlight flickering against the carved walls. Delphi was not merely a religious site. It was a machine of influence, subtle, enduring. You walk now among the ruins. The modern world has faded. There are no tourist guides here, no fences, no signs, just you and the stones. Time has worn them, but not erased them. The temple of Apollo still rises in fragments, columns broken like teeth, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The ground beneath is uneven, scattered with marble blocks and moss-covered steps. But in the quiet certainty that beneath the rituals and riddles, something was being touched. Perhaps not gods, perhaps not the future, but something deep within the human mind. The mountain light returns, soft and golden, casting long shadows through the colonnades. The valley stretches out before you, vast and green. The stones do not shimmer. There are no voices. The rocks crunch softly beneath your feet. The shadows lengthen. The wind grows cooler. No god appears in golden light. But the air is thick with meaning. The same way breath fogs a mirror. The same way a word spoken long ago still lingers on the tongue, dotted with olive trees and the winding thread of the river below. Somewhere, a shepherd's bell rings faintly in the distance. The wind carries it gently, folding it into the hush of the sacred slope. The Pythia, in her trance, did not simply recite verses. She became a vessel. Her breath changed. Her body responded. Modern scholars have argued endlessly about the vapors. Were they ethylene, methane, a form of naturally occurring hallucinogen? But no one can say for certain. No, our next stop lies in shaded courtyards under flickering oil lamps, where wine flows and voices rise, not in prayer or politics, but in performance. Let us step quietly into the gilded lives of Athenian elites. The geological features of the site do suggest fault lines, possible emissions, tectonic heat. But the science does not cancel the mystery. It only deepens it. You move slowly, your fingers brushing the stone. You pass the remains of the theater built into the hillside, where music and hymns once soared above the valley. Higher still lies the stadium, where athletic contests were held in Apollo's honor. As Rome rose and new gods arrived, Apollo's voice grew quieter. Earthquakes damaged the sanctuary, funding waned. And still, the oracle gave answers, now more guarded, more politic, but never entirely silent. It wasn't until the 4th century CE, under the weight of Christian imperial decree that the oracle was finally silenced. The temples were closed, the Pythia dismissed, the sanctuary left to stone and wind. And yet, even now, standing amid the ruins, you feel something, a presence not gone, but merely distant, as though Delphi is not empty, but sleeping. Races run under mountain light, muscles gleaming with oil, breath clouding in the cool air. But it is beneath the ground that Delphi grows strange. There are whispers, fragments of old records, odd mentions in forgotten scrolls of chambers deeper than those seen by most visitors. Caverns hidden beneath the main sanctuary, carved into the rock over centuries. Some say the priests used them for storage. Others suggest rituals, private, obscure. A few believe they were passageways to the underworld or to other states of consciousness. No map remains. No clear entrance is marked. But if you sit quietly at the edge of the sanctuary and let your eyes adjust to the shadow, you can almost imagine the way down. Picture a narrow staircase, rough-hewn, winding into the dark. You descend slowly, the air growing cooler with each step. The torch in your hand flickers, throwing shadows across the stone. The walls are damp, lichen brushing your fingertips. A faint trickle of water echoes in the distance, a sound older than language. You pass alcoves carved into the stone, empty now, but once perhaps filled with sacred vessels, scrolls, or small statues left as offerings. Deeper still, the path opens into a wide chamber. The ceiling arches overhead, too high to see clearly. In the center lies a pool, still, black, and quiet. Some believed the fumes rose from here. Others thought it was simply the breath of the mountain itself. It is in this silence that the true mystery of Delphi takes shape, not in the grandeur of the temple above, because mystery is not the absence of knowledge. It is the space where knowledge dissolves into wonder. You step back now, ascending slowly from the imagined chamber. In Delphi's later years, the temple began to fade. You take one last look at the temple, and so you turn. The sun is beginning to dip behind the mountains, casting the valley in bronze. The path leads downward, back toward the lowlands. And as you walk, the questions rise, soft, half-formed, unspoken. Will the path ahead be clear? Will the choices made in silence prove wise? Is the voice you followed ever truly gone? Delphi never gave answers, only directions. And in the hush between footsteps, perhaps, that is enough. And now, let us descend from the mountain heights and rejoin the city, but not the muddy streets of laborers and courts. Night has fallen over Athens. The noisy streets have quieted. the marketplace is closed, and the last of the clay oil lamps have been lit along doorways and narrow alleys. But in certain homes, those tucked behind higher walls, where the stone is smoother and the entrances guarded by discreet servants, activity is just beginning. This is not the realm of vendors and bricklayers, nor the crowded homes of the working class. It was where Athenian elites gathered not only to eat and drink, but to display wit, test philosophical ideas, retell myths, recite poetry, and gossip, always gossip about politics, rivals, and the endless shifts of fortune in the city's restless heart. It was his duty to decide the pace of drinking, to suggest the games, to set the tone of discussion. You sip from a shallow ceramic cup, its rim painted with scenes of Dionysus and satyrs dancing under vines. The wine is dry, slightly astringent. The conversations drift around you, some philosophical, some trivial, some razor-sharp with implication. One man praises a recent play at the theater of Dionysus, dissecting the characters with both insight and jealousy. Another recounts a recent case at the courts, pausing just long enough to suggest that the verdict may have been influenced. Someone else recites a poem in Homeric meter, his voice rich, the words slow and winding. Would the night be thoughtful or bawdy? Would they discuss ethics? Each guest is here not merely to enjoy, but to impress, to show his cleverness, his restraint, his cultural polish, to let others know, without saying so directly, that he understands politics better, that his lineage is older, that his slaves are more loyal, his estate better managed. Even the wine games kotabos, where players flicked wine lees at a target, were a chance to display grace under pressure. A good flick showed control, elegance. A clumsy one earned mockery. Or lovers, would a flute girl be invited to play? Would someone stand to sing? The evening flowed according to the mood. He allowed light or heavy, noble or shameless. Only men were allowed to attend, citizens, never foreigners. Wives remained in the women's quarters, removed from the wine and games of the gathering. The space was carefully arranged. Each guest reclined on a cushioned couch, the clinner arranged in a circle or a semicircle around a low table. They lay on their left elbows, their right hands free for wine or gesturing. Servants moved among them, silent, careful. Young boys poured wine diluted with water from decorative craters. The wine was always mixed. Drinking it undiluted, as the barbarians did, was considered crude, a loss of self-control. This is the world of the elite, the landowners, the politicians, the men whose names are spoken with caution or admiration at the agora. The air here smells faintly of pressed olive oil, of figs and roasted barley, and sometimes warmer evenings of rosewater sprinkled across the courtyard floor. You step through a shaded colonnade into a private courtyard, lit by low-burning lamps. The light is golden, flickering, casting long shadows that sway softly with each breath of wind. Slender columns rise around you, framing small citrus trees and potted laurels. The murmur of conversation hums from within a nearby room, and the sound of a lyre, gentle and slow, tugs at the edge of your hearing. You have arrived at a symposium, not a public debate, nor a festival. A symposium in Athens was something more intimate, part performance of self. At the center of it all was the symposiarch, the evening's master of ceremonies. Sometimes he was the host, sometimes a selected guest. You recline now in your imagination. The cushion beneath you, slightly worn, the table nearby bearing small plates of olives, cheese, almonds, and honey-soaked pastries. But even in this relaxed setting, competition pulses quietly beneath the laughter. Servants refill cups. A flute player begins a slow, winding tune. The lamps flicker, casting soft gold across painted walls that depict scenes of myths and battles, heroes in impossible poses, gods descending on mortals. But outside this room, the world is not so gilded. Even as the elites drink and muse on virtue, the city beyond the courtyard is stirring with other rhythms, the clatter of a late cart, the quiet sobs of a slave, girl punished for an error, the rustle of cats in the refuse near the pottery shops. Others rise and take their leave, slipping back into the cool Athenian night. Like a tide pulling back from the shore, the conversation slows, the laughter softens. The same men who reclined under painted ceilings also filled the rows of the theater, their expressions fixed in contemplation or in calculated reactions meant to be observed. For in Athens, drama was not merely entertainment. It was education, commentary, reflection. The plays performed at the great theater of Dionysus were civic events. Citizens attended en masse, sponsored by wealthy patrons who funded the chorus and costumes. It was a form of prestige funding. A good production could elevate your status nearly as much as winning a military campaign. The oil in the lamps burns low, and outside, the city prepares for another day. The servants clean quietly, lifting cups, sweeping crumbs, preparing for tomorrow. The host, if still awake, thanks those who remain. The flute player packs her instrument. A faint scent of wine lingers in the air, mixed now with lamp smoke and something like melancholy. Yet, within these walls, time stretches. These men speak of eternity, of the soul, of justice, as though none of it touches the dust of their sandals. They praise restraint, but eat until full. They preach civic duty, but avoid the draft. They quote Euripides and mock their rivals' accents. It is a performance, and they all know it. Perhaps, for a brief moment, the masks fall away, and the men remember that all of this power, property, poise is as fleeting as the wine on their lips. And the women, those few who appear at such events, are not wives or sisters, but hitare courtesans trained not only in beauty, but in music, conversation, and timing. They move through the room with practiced ease, offering compliments, playing instruments, laughing lightly at just the right moment. They are not equals, but neither are they invisible. Their presence is both ornamental and strategic. Later, as the wine takes hold, the tone may shift. Voices rise. The laughter becomes looser. The remarks bolder. A guest might stand to dance awkwardly to entertain the room. A mock trial may be held, with guests assigning each other absurd charges and defending themselves with drunken eloquence. Songs are sung gold drinking songs, hymns, sometimes verses from tragedies repurposed into satire. And always, the games continue verbal sparring, guessing riddles, philosophical duels disguised as jest. If there is a guest of honor, he may be tested, offered harder questions, more pointed jests. The occasional slight disguised as a compliment. And yet, despite the games and laughter, there are moments of quiet beauty. Perhaps someone tells a myth with unexpected tenderness. Perhaps a verse stirs the room into stillness. As the night deepens, some guests begin to nod off. The symposium ends not with applause, but with a gradual fading. But the world of the elite did not exist only in private homes. You picture the theater as it was, a vast semicircle carved into the slope of the Acropolis. Stone benches rising like waves around a wide, flat stage. The sun already hot, even in morning. The crowd murmuring, rustling, laughing softly. Who spoke best? Who offended? Who revealed too much of himself? Even art is a contest. Even thought is a kind of blood sport. Actors wearing masks, exaggerated expressions fixed in paint and linen step into view. A chorus begins to chant, their voices rhythmic, their steps practiced. The play might be a tragedy by Sophocles, exploring the limits of fate and duty. A careless word at a symposium might echo in court. A badly received play might tarnish a name. And so, the gilded life is not soft. It is sharp-edged and glittering, like a dagger adorned with jewels. Or perhaps a comedy by Aristophanes, filled with crude jokes and cutting satire about politicians seated only feet away. Away from the symposium and temple, the court and street. Let the noise fall away and listen only to the stillness. Let the rhythm of their lives settle gently beside your own, and allow sleep to rise, slow and steady, like the sun over Mount Parnassus. The city is beginning to stir again. The bakers knead dough in the pre-dawn dark. Water carriers fill their jugs. Roosters cry out across courtyards. And within the elegant walls of the symposium, the cushions are left indebted, the wine cups empty, the oil lamps spent. The laughter is real, but laced with recognition. The critiques are veiled, but sharp. And later, when the crowd disperses, the commentary continues in alleyways, in courtyards, in the quiet corners of the symposium. For the elite Athenian male, every moment is opportunity. A dinner becomes a stage. A compliment becomes a weapon. A quote from Homer can elevate or embarrass. Status is never stable. Reputation is a shifting wind. And thus, they live on edge, gracefully, charmingly, but never quite at ease. But there is a cost to such polish. Beneath the laughter, there is fear of decline, of disgrace, of being outshone or outmaneuvered. Inheritance is fragile. Alliances are temporary. As dawn approaches, the last of the guests stumble home or remain sleeping beneath their cloaks. Another night has passed in the world of the elite, and tomorrow it will begin again. And now, as the final echoes of laughter fade into morning haze, we step away from Athens entirely. Now the night has deepened. The moon, high above the city of Athens, has turned the marble rooftops to silver. And the alleyways are filled with little more than the quiet breath of sleeping homes. Even the dogs have settled. The wine has dried on the lips of poets, and the last torch at the temple of Apollo has long since guttered out. A place where men walked barefoot to jury duty in the dust, and then quoted Homer by oil lamp over figs and diluted wine. The daily life of an Athenian citizen, rough, unvarnished, and filled with little indignities. No running water, no soap, waste in the alleys. Up the slopes of Parnassus to the sanctuary at Delphi, men reclining with olives and ambition, exchanging verses and veiled threats in equal measure. It was a world of grace and sharpness, where even a riddle was a kind of duel. The symposium was not a mere gathering. It was theater, politics, and performance, all wrapped into one. And even as music played and jokes passed, beneath the surface stirred the same tension, the fear of being outshone, outmaneuvered, forgotten. The careful way a father tries to explain courage to his son. The names carved in marble, but marble is cold, and real history is warm. It lives in the breath of those who carried water, past the shaded olive groves, past the broken amphory by the pottery kilns. Let the names and dates slip away. Let only the feeling remain that you have touched something, not with your hands, but with your rest. Past the laughing boys at play near the fountain, and the tired man rubbing sore knees as he climbs the last hill toward home. Let your mind follow the gentle turns of history, not as facts to memorize, but as lives to feel. There is no test at the end, no lesson but this, that even the brightest lights are surrounded by shadow, and that it is the shadow that gives shape to the glow in the hands that swept the courtyards, in the silent tears of those who watched a friend board a warship they would never see again. Athens was never only its temples. It was its people, ordinary, flawed, full of contradictions, just like us. The hush of a woman placing laurel on a small household shrine, whispering to a god whose name she has spoken since childhood. The rhythm of their lives was slow, not easy, but steady, and it is that rhythm we carry with us now, like a lullaby sung in a language half forgotten. The elite Athenian life glittered, but it was not soft. It cut softly, like silk turned to wire. The stone paths coiled gently beneath our feet, carrying us toward the source of riddles and breath. There, in that mountain hush, we felt something shift. The oracle did not give answers. She offered space, a container for doubt, for longing, for fear, not with sorrow, but with the soft ache of having seen something clearly, something human. In her chamber, cloaked in incense and mystery, each visitor saw what they brought with them reflected back in soft, mirrored fragments. The divine did not shout, it whispered, and the Pythia, veiled in trance, was not a prophet of certainty, but a possibility. Her voice, cracked and halting, echoed not across the world, but within the hollow chambers of every soul that came seeking. And when the temple fell silent, when the fumes ceased and the gods withdrew, the stones did not collapse in sorrow. They simply slept. The hum of democracy, yes, but also the roar of the crowd. Jury service chosen by lottery, ostracism by popular vote. A society that praised reason and yet feared the mind, that asked too many questions. The smell of fish in the market. The cracked lips of the potter at his wheel. The muttered prayers of a mother dropping coins before the altar. These things, small, worn, and often forgotten were the rhythm of life, the pulse behind the statues, where the search for truth was a civic duty until it was no longer welcome. Socrates did not resist. He did not rage. He simply spoke, and in doing so, he revealed more than any verdict could contain. His death was not a tragedy in the theatrical sense, a reminder that even a city devoted to reason can lose its balance when fear creeps in, that the desire for order can sometimes smother the question it claims to cherish. His final words drifted into the stone walls of the prison like smoke from a snuffed lamp. calm, measured, certain only in uncertainty, where gods whispered through fumes in a darkened room, while politicians debated in blinding daylight. It was never one thing. It was never only glorious, and yet it was never only grim. All that remains is stillness, soft, expansive, and complete. It is in this stillness that we reflect, not just on what was seen and heard, but on what remains quietly unresolved. Like the fading edge of a dream, Athens, a city of contradictions, of brilliance and hardship, of grime and gold. We began in the streets. Then we moved to the trial, that quiet, profound space where one man stood against the swell of judgment. From there, we climbed. Then came the homes of the powerful, the polished courtyards, the laughing symposia under painted ceilings, oil lamps flickering on the curves of ceramic cups. All of this dirt and marble, wisdom and fear, flame and shadow was Athens. And now we leave it behind. Not with haste, you may still hear it. The scrape of sandals on stone, the murmur of a street vendor rearranging his baskets. The victories, the Parthenon, white against the sky. As your body relaxes, as your breath deepens, let yourself drift slowly through those quiet streets once more. Let the images fade now. The moon over the Acropolis, the torchlight at Delphi, the ripple of wine in a shallow bowl. Let them soften, grow dim. The past does not call loudly. It does not demand. Wait quietly, and now it sleeps with you.